Better dead than red was once the rallying cry in the United States and other democracies during the heyday of communist regimes led by the Soviet Union and China. Not anymore. Today, being politically red in America is a badge of honor for millions of voters. A red wave in Tuesday's general election swept Republican Donald Trump back into the White House, gave Republicans the majority in the US Senate, and could well enable the GOP to keep control of the US House. In blood red Ohio, the caveman caucus, with apologies to the caveman, is now firmly entrenched in government. The defeat of veteran Democratic US Senator Sherrod Brown at the hands of Donald Trump apologist Bernie Moreno sent shockwaves through the political establishment. So what's in store for the nation and the state of Ohio come January? I'm Bertram Souza, host of the Scribbler podcast and veteran Mahoning Valley journalist. I've invited three well-established political analysts who are regular guests on this podcast to delve into Tuesday's election results. They are Dr. William Binning, Professor Emeritus of Youngstown State University's Political Science Department and a former Ohio Republican Party insider. Brent Larkin, retired Cleveland Plain Dealer editorial page director and Sunday columnist. Brent continues to write his Sunday column for the newspaper and its website, cleveland.com. Dr. Tom Sudduth, retired veteran political reporter and columnist for the Plain Dealer. Tom, who teaches at Ohio University, continues to write a column for the newspaper and its website. So, let me start. Thank you, Bill, Brent, and Tom, for joining me for what many Americans would consider a political wake after Tuesday's election. So let's start with this question. Were you surprised by the political red wave that washed over the country and was particularly damaging in Ohio? Bill, go ahead first.
Was I surprised? Well, I was the only one didn't predict. You remember? I mean, I got to eat it for Brown, but I didn't predict. I didn't predict that Harris was going to win. I predicted chaos. In other words, I thought it was going to be actually closer, but I thought that Trump could win and might win. In fact, I thought, here also, I thought the week after we recorded last time that Trump had some momentum, but then I guess it seemed to stall out in the final week. So the point is, I wasn't surprised. I guess I'm surprised by and it's probably a good thing that the margins were clear, that we're not in an era of a lot of dispute over it. And we can thank Pennsylvania for that, because that's really, if you think about it, that's really what made the difference, because that put him over the top, and they're not disputing the ballots, et cetera. Because some of the Western states haven't been counted yet, right? Arizona and Nevada haven't given up their electoral college books yet.
Right. So, Brent?
Yeah, you're surprised when Trump wins the popular vote. I never read or heard from people who are worth listening to or reading that would happen. Who suggested that he would probably win every swing state? Nobody.
Right.
And this was not Nixon in 72 or Johnson in 64. It was a 51-49 election, and that's where the country is on any given day. But yeah, it was when I was watching, no surprise, MSNBC, and when he started showing on that map that red counties in Georgia were getting redder, a lot redder than 4 years ago. Oh, you think about Pennsylvania being, I kind of knew it was over. Anyways, and no one should be surprised all that much about Ohio. Ohio's been heading that way, and it's pretty.
Yeah,
we'll talk about Ohio.
We'll talk about Ohio specifically in a little bit.
Okay, then I'll shut up and let Tom.
Yeah, Tom, what was your take?
Well, until last weekend, I'm not sure what made me change my mind. I said, along with Bill a few weeks ago, I thought that Sherrod Brown might pull it through, but I thought it would be on the order of a Jimmy Carter in 1976 in Ohio, 10,000 vote squeaker. I thought that. I changed my mind. I knew that the vice president wouldn't carry Ohio. I thought there was a chance she'd carry nationally. I wasn't sure of that. But I also knew, and I was sorry to realize it last weekend that issue one was doomed, unfortunately.
Right.
And so there weren't any surprises in that respect, although we'll talk later about the Ohio Democratic Party in the state, but that's another matter. So I was not terribly surprised that Mr. Trump did as well as he did nationally, or seems to have done nationally, is something of a surprise. But again, a lot of that has to do with the way that the entourage around Mr. Biden stalled, delayed, hid his
Right.
situation for so long, and let not have a real Democratic campaign lead up to the nomination of the vice president.
Okay, Donald Trump's victory has been called historic, a landslide, an endorsement of his extremist agenda that includes the deportation of 11 million illegal immigrants, tax breaks for corporations and wealthy Americans, and tariffs of 10% to 20% on foreign goods. What does that say, Brent, about the American electorate that would embrace this kind of an agenda?
2 weeks ago Sunday, I wrote a column saying about the saying, "We're better than this." We hear that after Sandy Hook. We hear that whenever somebody does something evil. We're better than this, and I honestly viewed this election as a test of whether or not we are better than this.
Right.
And the voters answered it when we are not.
Yeah. Bill?
Well, I think well, I throw out two. I mean, there's so many things that you could say about the election. I think that the key issue was inflation, even though we didn't have inflation. But you
Right.
can't persuade voters you don't have inflation. That they go to the store and the price of eggs and bread and milk is still much higher for average people. And those are the people that voted for Trump.
Right.
Were people who are on tight budgets. And when he said, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" They don't think they were, even though inflation's down. The other thing I wanted to throw out there, since we're looking for reasons, I read in the National Catholic Register just half hour ago. Catholics were the key to this. They were voted overwhelmingly.
Yes.
Conservative Catholics voted overwhelmingly for the Trumpster. So I just wanted to throw us Catholics are making. We're taking credit for this.
Yeah, I know. Tom, what do you
I want
make,
you to know that.
what do you make of the agenda and the American electorate?
I think that most people just want to be able to grab a cold beer, watch NFL on Sunday, and not be bothered by much. And if they can get through a week of going to the store, going to the gas pump, and not noticing things being worse than they think they should be, they really don't get that cerebral about the whole process. And they should, but they don't. And I'm not being disrespectful. We're a sovereign nation with individual sovereignty for people. They have every right to decide that. But I not think there's a whole lot of intellectual debate goes on with people individually about these choices. And I'm not saying that I'm complaining about that. That's what I think happened. I also think, frankly, that Biden, again, mishandled the whole transition, et cetera, to another candidate. And I also think that the president-elect does what a lot of successful politicians do, is tell people what they want to hear, not what's
Exactly.
going to happen.
Right.
And that really has to happen. And I want to throw in one thing about that. For example, you can't tell me that the big money people in Silicon Valley and Wall Street are going to let her really impose tariffs and have Congress go along with that because of their interest in foreign trade. So
Exactly.
one thing there.
And you're right. I think either Trump knew this or knows this and just lied when he talked about tariffs, or he's too stupid to know this. But I don't think he's too stupid to know this, because he's got a lot of interests foreign-wise as far as business interests go. He knows the effects of tariffs, and he knows how they affect the American pocketbook. But let me throw out some numbers for you, so that, because I know all of you have crunched numbers and looked at them and analyzed. So here's here are the people who voted. White men, who was 34% of the voters on Tuesday. 39% voted for Kamala Harris, 59% for Donald Trump. These are white men. White women, who made up 37% of the vote, 47% voted for Kamala Harris, 52% for Donald Trump. Black men, who made up 5% of the vote, 78% of course voted for Harris, 20% for Trump. Black women, 7% of the vote, 92% were for Harris. It was inconsequential for Trump. Hispanic Latino men, who made up 6%, 44% for Harris, 54% for Trump. I mean, going into this election, Bill, would you have considered this kind of a breakdown of their vote?
Well, I think the polls were showing. So that's not surprising. I mean, the polling data going into this election showed that the Hispanic vote, Trump's success with the Hispanic vote, where Republicans never did very well before. I think what was surprising, although the polls did show it, black men voting is surprising, and that's a big change from. So those are big changes, and that also leads to the point about the future of these parties. I can remember, and it wasn't very long ago, that everybody would say, well, the Republicans are done, the Democrats have the future, all the black people and the brown people, they're all going to be voting for the Democrat, and there's the few whites that are left are not going to be able to carry the day, and that's going to be the end of the Republican Party. And we see a dramatic change here, especially with Hispanics. I mean, Hispanics have he carried Miami-Dade County even after the Puerto Rican joke.
Yeah.
Can I add one more number there?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I'm quoting Ron Brownstein here that among white pro-choice women, Trump got 1 out of every 4 votes. And I would have not said that a week ago, and I don't think anyone would have. It's just a pretty surprising statistic.
Yes, it is.
And a couple of people have, we can't underestimate how deeply unpopular Joe Biden is and was,
Yes.
and how she was unable to shake that. She may have contributed during a couple moments to that, but there's no reason for him to be this unpopular. Actually, no scandals. He's not a bad man.
A great economy.
Yes. And to your point on tariffs, Donald Trump cares more about the stock market than he does about the American people. And that's just a fact. And he knows or will be told what it would do to the financial markets if he slaps tariffs on everything.
Right.
Interest rates rise, inflation returns, and the economy goes in the tank quickly.
Right.
I think
Tom, on the breakdown of the vote, go ahead and sort of weigh in.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
On the breakdown of the vote, the way I read out, were you surprised at the number of white women, for example, who voted for Trump?
No, I was not, because I just think that people have come. I think it is true on some level that the fact that the states have jurisdiction over reproductive right now, reproductive decision making, that the continuing basis, other states have gone along with Ohio. 2 did not, but they weren't really surprising. No one pointed out that Florida, for example, had to have a 60% yes vote to pass. I also want to say this, and I'm not saying this to be politically correct or anything else. I think that on some level there was resistance to having a woman president.
Yes, I agree with you.
I'm not saying I'm not condemning anybody, I'm not questioning anybody. I just think that's there.
Right.
And I think that has to be at least something of a factor.
Yeah, and in fact, Bill, will come to you on that one, or Brent. I had a note here saying, for the second time, the American people rejected a female presidential nominee. Both Vice President Harris and former U.S. Secretary of State and U.S. Senator Hillary Clinton were highly qualified to be president. What does that say about America today? Bill?
Well, I'm not sure. I give you a different take. I think there was a problem with Harris, and I'd go back to blaming the way Biden dealt with her over the years. I don't think there was confidence that she was ready to be president of the United States, not because she's not gold in my ear or you know what I mean? It doesn't have a history of battle. She's not a battle-tested warrior. I think that's true with Hillary Clinton. Clearly, she was qualified. I mean, I don't think anybody said she wasn't qualified. I think there were some doubts, and it wasn't because she was. It would have been the same. Would have been the same for a male who had been put in the same position that Biden did to her, which was not really elevate her, put her in a position, or give her a sort of the background basis you need, where you felt confident that she could handle things. That I don't think it's just. I think there is maybe some resistance to women, but I think I would say there was some question about whether she was really
okay.
suited. Because the only thing there, what did we ever hear about her? They appointed her to be the border czar, and then they made a joke out of all that. After that, we never saw or heard much from her for 4 years.
To continue that point, that how do you explain Donald Trump in 2016? He was not battle tested. All he knew was how to grab women by their private parts, and he was host of a fake show. And yet he in 2016.
Well, I think that was a different election. I'm not talking about that. I think that's right. I think there was probably resistance to women that's my point in the Hillary election. I don't think there's any question that you could not, no one could say that Hillary Clinton was not qualified.
Right.
And ready to take the job. She's more qualified than Trump and Biden. I'm saying in this particular election, I don't think it's just, I think we have to look a little at some other factors besides the fact it was just a gender issue. I do blame the Biden and Democrats for not if she was going to be the candidate, they needed to build her up over the years to make her ready. She never really seemed to have a critical role in the administration. And at least I might have missed it, but I didn't see it.
Brent?
Somebody mentioned, speaking of Clinton, when you were talking about it, it brought to mind in shortly before he died in 2016, Voinovich wrote an op-ed that appeared in the Plain Dealer, talking about how qualified Clinton was to be president. They had served together on foreign relations, probably. And imagine a former Republican senator writing something like that today. And it's just another sign of how much things have changed in this country and this state.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
I agree. I want to stress again that I only think the female thing was a smidgen of this result. I'm not saying it was a dominant thing. I think it was a factor.
Mhm.
I agree with Brent. I think that amity or comity between the parties is gone. I think the individual relationships in Congress sometimes maintain despite every appearance to the contrary. But I think that's a major problem. The polarization, not just of the country, is reflected in congressional antics, which is what they are, between the caucuses and the respective Senate and House chambers.
All right, so let's turn to the Donald Trump Republican Party and its influence in Ohio. In Ohio, the blood red wave washed away Democratic U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, a veteran office holder respected around the country. He will be replaced by Cleveland businessman Bernie Moreno, whose sole qualification for office was the endorsement from Donald Trump. I believe all of us thought that at the very least, Sherrod had a chance of hanging on to his seat. What happened, Bill?
Well, I think Sherrod Brown and his people told us what was going to happen. If Trump, there's nothing but coke. They told us if Trump went over 8%,
Right.
he couldn't survive. And that was clearly the case. I mean, Trump was over with 10 or better in Ohio, and the Brown people said that they couldn't survive if he went over 8.
He went over 8 by about as much as Sherrod lost, about 4 points.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's what it was. It was nothing other than that. And the other thing was a nationalized race. I mean, the stuff they would bring in, the campaign ads and issues, et cetera. But I think that Sherrod Brown people told us what was going to happen.
Tom, to what extent was Sherrod Brown's political leanings and ideology a problem in a state like Ohio?
Well, I didn't, by choice, I don't see television ads, so everyone else here did.
Right.
My impression was that the Republican opponents of Brown mobilized the usual cadre of so-called social issues, gender,
Yes.
reproductive health, other matters like that to stir up people.
Transgender.
And I would say this, if those issues didn't cut in Ohio, our legislature wouldn't spend so much time wasted on those issues themselves. They get polling for their caucuses about LGBT and Q and reproductive health and so forth. So in one sense, I'm not surprised at all. What I am surprised by was the fact that there was as big a gap between him and his challenger as there was in the final result. I understand that his campaign said 8%, this percent, all that stuff. That's
Right.
Campaign people running, whatever. But I thought it would be at least a less dramatic gap between him and his opponent in the final tally, because of the fact that he's knows so many bazillion people in the state and has dealt with so many local officials in the state for all these years, getting when he was in the House and also in the Secretary of State's office. And I think the social issues obviously cut, or they wouldn't use them as much as they do.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Brent, go ahead.
I believe the most effective ad that Marino aired was the transgender ad. It's an ad that the thought of someone who was born a male playing women's volleyball strikes most everyday Americans as unfair. And it strikes me as perhaps unfair. And but in Ohio, there's in the last 8 years, there have been literally about 12 cases where this has happened. And it's the most overblown crock of shit, excuse my language.
That's all right.
But it cuts very deeply. I read a story in the New Yorker yesterday that Trump's pollster, what's his name? Is it Schwartz? What's his name? It's an Italian name. Anyways, he's obviously has done a good job. He said when they first began airing transgender ads at the start of the NFL season on NFL games, Trump's numbers moved 2.5 points in one day.
Wow.
Think about that.
Wow.
And I think that brought Sherrod down. Sherrod had to answer those ads, as you know.
I saw those.
And by then, maybe it was too late.
What does it say about, and I don't want to be demeaning, but about the intelligence of the electorate when they are able to be bamboozled by this kind of an issue?
I'll get in trouble. Somebody else answer.
Brill?
I don't know the bamboozle that it bothers them and it bothers them to the extent from the polling data that's going to affect it's going to be one. I still think it was the inflation, but it's one factor in it's not bamboozling. I mean, they respond to that. People get stirred up over that, and they'll keep using it as long as people get stirred up over.
I'm going to add one thing. Martina Navratilova has been warning her party about this for years, literally years, that they were going down a dangerous political path. And, she's an openly gay woman, and she was proven correct on Tuesday.
Tom?
I think the other thing is that in our country, in our society, in our culture, the one common language that Americans, regardless of gender, ethnicity, national heritage, faith, tradition, have is athletics and sports.
Yeah.
And I think framing this the way they did as a changing the rules in a terribly unfair way as to athletics was a very effective way to find common ground with lots of people otherwise wouldn't have common ground. Now, that said, I do find it ironic to see so many people so concerned about equity for women in athletics and not concerned about equity for women in all kinds of other fields. We'll leave that for another day. But it was a way to approach people on the terms. You know yourself, any two guys or two women are interested in sports in a given setting, you can find a way to talk about the Browns and the Bengals and the Steelers and all that. It's common language, and I think that's part of it. And people think a lot of things that aren't necessarily the way things really operate. And Brett pointed out the High School Athletic Association and high school sports, scholastic sports, has had an incredibly tiny number of these instances arise in Ohio. But
go ahead.
Trump said, and others said, that parents were sending little Ben off to school in the morning, and Ben was coming back as Betty.
Yes.
And do you guys think that people actually believe that?
I don't know. Given the electorate, I really don't know. I mean,
I think some people did, and that was part of the 50% of the vote. So
no, it's laughable. It's so absurd.
You just got to find a few percentage points to win this election.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
It doesn't what people believe it.
That's right.
what's going to move this small percentage of the vote, especially with given all Trump's baggage. You got to find something else for them to be interested in. I want to talk about I want to bring up one other issue, and hopefully we're going to move on from the presidency. But I do think on the agenda, I don't know that Trump actually believes or cares about what he says. But what I want to know is he's not going to tax tips. He's not going to tax Social Security. He's not going to tax overtime. Now, how the hell is he going to? Can't possibly do that given the current budget situation and the fact that a lot of that money also goes into Social Security and Medicare. So they got to know that's bullshit.
Yeah,
but he don't care because there's a constituency for each one of those. Those are for certain particular people. The tips, especially, that was out in Vegas, wasn't it? Where he's pushing that.
I just read this morning a little comment that said that if you're retired and you receive a pension and also Social Security, Trump is going to cut your Social Security benefits because you're getting a pension. It doesn't matter from where. And I don't know if that's true or not, but there's always that danger. But let me talk about
that's going to take Congress. He can't do that. It's not.
No, but if the Republicans control both houses, you don't think they would be scared of Trump and his agenda? I mean,
well, we could talk about that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Ohio. And the red wave in Ohio also demolished State Issue 1, the constitutional amendment that would have ended the political drawing of legislative districts, and gave Republicans a 6-1 majority in the Ohio Supreme Court.
Yeah.
What does that hold for the future of the state? And Tom, go ahead.
Well, I think in the Supreme Court, I think all the voters who supported reproductive rights on the statewide ballot last year are going to find that this Supreme Court is going to find all kinds of ways to tangle that up. The Chief Justice, no disrespect, is an acknowledged supporter of the Right to Life movement, has gone to Right to Life events and so forth. The others are from different parts of the state. Now, Shanahan and Dieters are both, and Mike and Pat DeWine off from Southwest Ohio, Republican anti-choice country. Justice Fisher is, I wouldn't say he's particularly either way about it. That's number one. I think that's going to be a significant, have a significant impact. As to issue 1, I won't tell you my lead up and anecdote, which is a very good one, but I won't waste your time with it. I am convinced.
Oh, please do. I love it.
Tell us.
The anecdote's only that I talked to one of the most intelligent people I know. Not here, not in, I mean, just so you know, it's no one here in Athens or in Youngstown, but and we were talking about the election and just in general. And this is the person who voted for the vice president, who voted for Sherrod Brown. And without me saying anything, I said, I was really concerned about issue 1. And this person said, I was too. I voted no. And I said, well, why did you vote? Why did you come to choose that vote? Well, I'm against gerrymandering. The ballot line, this is a very brilliant person with a PhD. I mean, you met this person.
That's questionable.
But it's on the ballot language right there. And
Yes.
owe a huge debt to the ever upright Secretary of State, Mr.
Yes.
Woodrow,
Yes.
for that. I mean, the other stuff was a factor. It was a complicated issue the way it was written anyway, but the ballot language was fatal, I think.
Yeah, and if you read the caption when you went
Yes.
to vote,
Yeah.
it was it basically said they're taking power away from your politicians or some crap
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And it was so obvious and blatant. And I'm thinking, if somebody hasn't been following this issue, guess what?
That's right. And I mean, I have no doubt. I didn't even tell the person that there was a mistake made.
It was a brilliant move on the part of the Secretary of State and other Republicans to so muddy the issue and the caption and the language.
What we're missing here is,
Go ahead.
the Ohio Supreme Court let them get away with it,
Oh, yes.
right?
I want to put a footnote in this. I did predict that it was going to fail, and I've said because no is always favored on state issues.
Yes, that's true.
All of the opponent had to do was raise a reasonable doubt, which they didn't have to win the argument, and which is what Tom pointed out. They just created confusion, and when people are confused, which
It's a
they
no
were
vote.
by this, they were going to vote no. It's very hard to pass anything in Ohio, even if everybody's for it, to get a yes vote.
And the
And
no, the no vote people got outspent like what, 6-7-1?
Yeah,
yeah, right. They just had to raise doubt, and that's it. And no is going to win. That's what I
that's
believe.
right. That's right. But I do think that the deliberate, incredible misinformation
Yes.
campaign worked.
But But
It's
if
right.
you want to follow that though, so let's take
I-
Tom's point. The now we have pure chaos in this redistricting because with the state legislative approach that this Supreme Court of Ohio has never validated what they've been doing. So
That's
what
true.
they've been doing is unconstitutional, and it's only for 2 years. And so I think Tom's point is right. I think going forward, I think that's really where to watch the court.
Well, that's true.
If the Supreme Court now will give them room to continue along. Now the governor says he's for something new. He wants an Iowa thing, and he wants legislature's not going to do anything, and he's not going to get a petition for it. So we're going to live in this chaos indefinitely. I think because the current system is not. Well, I think the court will. What do you people think? Don't you? Do you think the court will come to support the current system?
The court will uphold virtually anything that the legislature
Right.
does. And
Okay.
that is, we've seen that coming. And of all this galaxy of state Republicans who have now an ironclad grip on state government, the only one in my mind who even approaches normalcy occasionally is the governor.
Yeah.
None of the others. I mean, NONE,
No.
none of the others.
And,
So
and it was the Chief Justice was their biggest problem, and she's gone. She's the one who really kept that pot stirred up and moved to have those redistricting plans ruled unconstitutional. And
Yeah.
she was a leader in this fight for the issue.
yeah, I haven't
I
seen
don't know if there's a voice for this.
her quoted yet. Is anyone else?
I have not. No.
The Chief Justice, former Chief Justice.
Yeah.
She has been in some stories in the Dispatch and the Inquirer the last day or so.
Okay, she's just thrilled, huh? With her
I
column.
can't recall what she said, although other than the fact that they're going to come back, she says, with again to the electorate. Not
Okay.
to say when, but that's just it. And
Let me ask about this then. Before we talk about the future of the Democratic Party, not only in Ohio, but in the United States, who is the top Republican in Ohio today? In Donald Trump's Ohio?
That's a good question. I don't know.
J.D. Vance.
I agree.
Well, sure, yeah, right.
agree with
Vance is the top Republican now.
Yeah, but Vance has his eye on the presidency, and I think
Well, and he's
He's going to be president.
I think in his
Yes.
deep in his recess of his complicated mind, he's hoping that Trump doesn't make 4 years.
well, have you seen what Trump eats?
Yeah, he'll encourage Trump to go to McDonald's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, no. But as far as governor goes, who would be the leading candidate for governor in Ohio on the Republican side?
Well, we don't know that. I think that the lieutenant governor is viewed as, but I don't think he's got a lock on this. But right now, he's viewed as the heir apparent. If he doesn't take the Senate seat, he's going to be the heir apparent for the Republican nomination. But this Vivek, the last interview I saw with him, they were raising a question about whether he wanted the Senate seat, and he said he was an executive. So he's very popular with the Republican rank and file. I'll tell you that. So he will be a formidable primary candidate if he gets into that governor's race.
Well, and just to be snarky, his name isn't Brown, but he is Brown, so there is an advantage there. But anyway, Tom, in your mind, who is the Republican leading candidate for governor?
I think at this point, I think the DeWine crowd and a lot of the crowd from going back a ways would be backing Lieutenant Governor. I do think so. I think it's fluid, though, depending on the Senate appointment. I do think that. I know, obviously, the Attorney General wants very much to be governor. What I'm told by some people that probably know is that Lieutenant Governor has been assiduously raising money for this whole long number of years now for the Senate, for a governorship race.
Right.
And I think that's probably true.
Brent?
I think I think John Husted is the favorite today. And I think that Yost is planning on running, and if it doesn't work out, he'll just, he'll be 69 years old, I think. And he's kind of a buffoon, but everything, this guy is the most overtly political AG I've seen in a while. He intervened on behalf of Browns fans and invoking this kind of probably unconstitutional Modell law. And
Hey, Brent, we brought up this IQ question. I think we'd have quite a few problems here if we started giving IQ tests to these candidates.
Yeah, I'm
Him
ashamed
being one of them.
I'm ashamed to say that Yost is a former journalist, right?
yes,
Yes.
was it the Citizen Journal, Tom? Tom
Ohio
probably-
State graduate. He was around my cohort, although I'm older because I took forever. And he was with the Citizen Journal
Yeah.
for a number of
Was
years.
he any good at it?
Pardon me?
Was he any good at it?
Passable journeyman.
Okay.
And then he went to work for Buck Reinhardt
Yes.
as a
Oh,
press
okay.
person in the bus, and he went to Capitol Law School, I think, at night, which is common in Columbus. And he's something of a rock and roll musician, although he's a little bit old to be doing that at this stage of his life, but that's his thing.
So let's talk about the Democratic Party in Ohio first, and then in the United States, because there was a discussion on NPR as I was driving in about the Democratic Party and where it goes from here. And so, Tom, let me start with you about Ohio. What is the state of the Democratic Party today, and how does it sort of recover from this pasting it received on Tuesday?
I don't know how it recovers, but I do know that if things remain the same, it'll be doomed for the foreseeable future. I think it's in complete disarray. I think the telling thing, I think this afternoon was a very good interview story, by the way, on a lot of this stuff in the Dispatch about a lot of things. And you started to see the statements from some Democratic inside. Well, we got the plan, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I think they've been a mess since Dick Celeste left office, frankly.
Yeah.
And Jim Ruvalo left the chairmanship. I do. I mean, they won some offices, but I think it's a total mess. And I think I won't go any further. I wrote about this a little tiny bit for Sunday, but nothing dramatic I had reveal. But being that I'm from the neck of the woods that you're from and that Bill will start in, I think they don't understand the degree to which Ohio has changed.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can't find advantages in how Ohio now is, but they don't understand how to take advantage of those changes, which you can do, I think. And so you have basically, and they've always been fixated on Washington, on the Senate, the presidency, and Congress, not the General Assembly,
Right.
Supreme Court, which really affects people much more directly than as other people do. I think, figuratively speaking, someone's got to go in there, I don't know who it'll be, and kick some backside in the organization and get some things changing. But it may not happen. I don't know.
Bill, there was a time when you were chairman of the Mahoning County Republican Party, and you were a voice in the wilderness.
Yeah.
In fact, you tried to make inroads into local elections by running candidates with the strong support of the Youngstown Vindicator, I might add, and me. So we tried to break this Democratic wall. And yet, you had to live through that. And now the Democrats are living through the same thing. What do you think they have to do in order to...
You make a point that people shouldn't forget, and it takes time, but things change. And Ohio might change. And it may not be because of what some person, I mean, like you pointed out, when I first started, the whole state was Democratic.
Yeah.
The only person that had any success was Jim Rhodes. The rest of the Republican Party and et cetera was worthless. They had no juice in the legislature and had trouble holding the court, and it was very problematic. And then things just changed when Voinovich came in with Taft, and the whole ball started rolling a different way. Well, that can happen. That can happen again. and it might, and maybe it will. I wanted you to think of two things. Will Sherrod Brown take an interest in the Ohio Democratic Party? That's a question. I'm sure he's not thinking about that today. Is because he's the only one that knows really what to do and how to do it, raise money or how to campaign in the state of Ohio, et cetera. I don't know if he's up for that. Didn't he put the chair in for the state party?
The entire party is his.
Right.
Yeah.
The infrastructure, they're all his people.
Well, do you think Amy Acton is a serious candidate for this?
I don't. And I have a very high regard for her
Right.
personally. And I just not sure if she's up to taking what they would throw at her. I mean, the COVID, it was just, guys in assault weapons were parading outside her house.
Yeah.
There's some things aren't worth it.
But Bill, you talked about Sherrod. I watched his concession speech, and he's not going anywhere. There's still that fire in him. He's still a true believer. Now, I mean, I'm sure there are issues where he's not going to be as will push as hard. But when I heard him speak, it was as though he said, this is not the end. We're going to keep fighting. And I think that you're right. Sherrod Brown might emerge as somebody in the Democratic Party that
he could run for governor, but
what do you think of that?
The sixth year.
How old is he?
He's
72 today, I think.
Today.
Yeah.
How old is he?
72 today.
He's not going to run, but I think the near future of the Democratic Party rests with him. He's the future. The short-term future of the Democratic Party in Ohio is what Sherrod Brown decides to do, because he can raise the money. He knows people. There's really nobody else that has that kind of. Tim Ryan's not going to come back and do anything.
No, keep in mind, you all know this. The sixth year of the second term of a president is almost always a catastrophe for the party in power in Washington.
Right.
I mean, probably.
Well, we're talking about in Ohio, yeah. That could change.
Yeah, and it would have to be a catastrophe for the Republicans to have a chance of being competitive.
Well, here's what somebody sent me. First of all, Bill raised the issue of the midterms.
Yeah.
And somebody else sent me a note talking about, well, yeah, I'm depressed today, but I'm sort of already looking forward to a blue wave.
Yes.
But let me point this out. What would happen if Donald Trump, during the midterms, starts kicking out, deporting the 11 million illegals, puts them on trains and planes and cars, and then opens up these concentration camps for those he cannot get rid of immediately? In the America that I see today, that would resonate. Because it seems to me that there are a lot of Americans who have bought into this lie that these immigrants are coming into America, taking first of all, taking jobs away from Americans, but secondly, welfare recipients, getting free money, getting free housing, and these are people I've talked to are thoughtful people who believe that.
But Bertram, whatever he's going to do, he's not going to wait 2 years to do it.
Okay.
Right?
You got to do that right away. If he's going to do something, he's got to do that first week.
Yeah.
He's got to start that the first. That's central to his campaign promise. And that's really what's going to be most interesting to see what he does or how he does it to round these people up.
He can do it in the first day. He's going to end the war in Ukraine in the morning.
Right.
Then in the afternoon, he'll take care of the immigration problem and the tariffs in early evening.
Right.
So, but what about the midterms? Do you anticipate any kind of Democratic comeback, Tom?
I think it's really too soon to know. I don't have any idea how the Democratic leader really is in the House. Jeffries, I just don't know enough about his dynamic in the Senate. I presume Schumer will stay in, but again, who knows? And they're the ones that call the shots, which is one of the problems in Ohio with congressional and Senate campaigns. It's people in Washington who have all these degrees and all these coastal experiences try to come in and run these campaigns and don't know their backside from a hole in the ground. I think that's unfair to nice people, but that's what I think. But I
I'm
don't
gonna-
think so. I
Go ahead.
mean, yeah,
Tom,
go ahead.
No, Tom, finish your thought.
Well, I just think, and I also think that a lot depends on so many other factors. I think one thing, I'm not saying we should get into this now, but we forget we're peripherally involved in two gigantic wars in Ukraine and in the Near East. One way or the other, we're involved, and the implications of that for all kinds of things are very powerful. And in our country's debates and our relationships with Vladimir Putin and so forth. So I think there's just too many variables right now to know that. The guy just got elected the other day, and we'll see how it goes. I just don't know.
I'll make a bold prediction,
Okay.
and hopefully some of us will still be around in 2 years. But given this, even if the Republicans take the majority in the House, which is still questionable, but likely,
Likely.
the number's not going to be much greater than it currently is.
Right.
No,
I don't think there's any question that in the midterm, the Democrats will take the House.
Mm-hmm.
No
Wow.
question about it. I don't think there's any question.
well,
Why, Bill? Why are you so confident? Because you had mentioned that to me before.
But
Why?
it's historically true. I mean, you go back in history, very few times. I think one was Bush after 9/11. He was able to hold on because of the war. So you can have some kind of a major historical event, but normally, what's going to happen? People are going to become disappointed with things the way they are because they are going to be disappointing, and they're going to blame it on the White House and the party in the White House, and they're going to take it out on that party, and they're going to lose. The Republicans get the House this time with such a slim majority. They're going to lose it. They may.
Bill, imagine if they repeal Obamacare, and Trump is obsessed with that.
Right.
He doesn't like the fact that Obama is so much smarter than him, and he belittled him in that event a decade ago. And I think if they get rid of Obamacare, it could be a catastrophe.
Tom?
I want to mention one thing about that real fast. As you in Northeast Ohio know, with the problem of the war in hospitals and everything else, hospitals are working, except for the gigantic teaching hospitals, in very tight margins. If they abolish Obamacare, that'll kill Medicaid expansion. I had the numbers in my last, I don't know the number.
Sure.
That's hundreds of thousands of Ohioans will not have medical care coverage, which means they'll be indigent care, which means whether it's Mercy Health, St. Elizabeth,
Yes.
or anything else, the hospitals and communities are going to go broke. I mean, totally broke. And I don't think that's sustainable.
And that's only one issue that's going to be around, and it may not be as drastic as that, but there's no question they're going to cut back on
Yeah.
Medicaid. There's no
That's
question,
true.
and they're going to let the exchange subsidies that Biden put in there. They're not going to renew those. So
Right.
there's going to be cuts automatic. It may not be as dramatic as you're suggesting, but it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad on these hospitals, and that's only part of the economy. What is people are going to be waiting for these tariffs to bring back all of these jobs, and they're going to.
Yeah.
And that's not going to. I mean, I'm just telling you, the midterm is because it's so close. That in the House. And so there's no question.
But
It could be dramatic.
but underlying all of this,
dramatic, you're still going to lose the House.
yeah. But underlying all of this for the midterms is the Democratic Party itself and how efficient and how good it can be in sort of taking advantage of all of the things you say that could trip up the administration. And I think that's a big question mark right now. Is the Democratic Party up to the task?
Well, let me. I don't want to dominate this
Go ahead.
conversation, but just from my own personal experience, when I was a party operative,
Yes.
when we were in that situation that they're in, you didn't take the actions you needed to take advantage of the opportunity that came. And that's likely to be a problem for the Democrats. In other words, you don't get the best candidates in the field. You don't have the money. You don't have, because you're just down on your back. So you don't put the players in place, because it's hard to go today to try to go convince some local businessman, Democrat, to run for Congress or state house in the next election. You can't talk them into that. So they just took a beating. But that you can't convince them. It's a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, I know.
And it will be, but so you don't get. My point is, you don't take full advantage of your opportunity when you're in that position. That doesn't mean you can't gain, and I think they will gain because especially in the House, because it's so few people. I mean, just a handful of seats they got to take.
Right.
Um,
Take the majority.
Brent, before we sign off, there are a lot of people who are sort of depressed today. There are a lot of people who wonder what the future holds. You and Tom have both observed politics for many, 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 many years. Is there reason for this? Is there cause for concern and reason to be worried about the next Trump administration? Brent?
I have 3 grandchildren I worry about a lot more than me. Whether they, I have a nice life. I'm 77 years old.
Sure.
I worry about the younger people in this country. But about Trump, I listened today to a clip of what people were saying on January 7th, 2021. And to a person, Republicans said it's over for him. He will never come back.
Yeah.
One of them said he'll never set foot in this town again. And now the enormity of his comeback is not something to gloss over. None of us have ever seen anything like it. Look what happened on that day, on
Right.
January 6th. And now he wins the popular vote. That has to tell us something about this country.
Tom?
I agree with almost everything Brent said, and most all of it, actually. But I want to make this observation. This may sound comical coming from me, who's supposed to be what I'm supposed to be. For 25 years now, I've worked with 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, college students, and mostly Caucasian kids, a good mixture of gender, not that many, enough kids maybe of enough ethnic background. And all else considered, again, allowing for environmental challenges, I am optimistic that in the end, when the generations move on, we'll be in a stronger position as a country than we were and than we are today. Now, again, that I'll be dead when this all plays out, but I'm certainly not optimistic about things right now. But I also think that there's institutional forces in this country that will keep him from going too far on certain things, especially economic things. But as for the young men and women that are coming up now of all ethnicities and all faith traditions and everything else, the ones I've encountered basically make me optimistic for the future. I know it sounds crazy coming from me, but that's what I think.
I think I should be. Bill, I'm going to give you the last word since you've watched this longer than all of us.
Yeah, well, I've watched it longer than all of you. Go ahead.
So your view of what has happened, what happened on Tuesday, and where we go on from here.
Well, I want to put in a little footnote on what Brett said. One of the interesting questions now, going back to January 6th, is he going to pardon all those people that have sentenced to prison? That's going to be very controversial if he goes in. And is he going to pardon everybody? Is he going to pick and choose? What's he going to do?
The nonviolent ones.
That's a good question. I'm like Tom. I'm optimistic about the future. I don't know about the short term. I'm interested. I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with the Ukraine. That's a very interesting question. Yeah. I think this did buttress Netanyahu. I no question about that. I think that the election did buttress him. But if I was a Ukrainian, I'd be pretty nervous.
let me close with this. There's a young woman I know who, because of some medical problems, cannot have children. And on the 6th, the day after the election, she posted this that said, "I'm glad I don't have children." And it struck me that there are people in this country who are so afraid of what is going to happen, especially to women, that I never thought in America we'd be at that stage. So we'll see what happens. I'm thinking that perhaps come January for the inaugural, we might get together and have a chat about it, because by then we'll know exactly what Donald Trump's immediate agenda is going to be, because he'll lay it out, obviously. But thank you,
Fair
also,
enough.
Bill, Brent, and Tom, again,
Thank
for a wonderful time. I regret that we are seeing a country that is sort of in transition, and I don't think in a good way. But maybe Bill's optimism and is going to rub off on me one
I
day.
didn't say I was optimistic. I mean, I'm with Tom. I think things that, despite the fools that we have in office, I think things will eventually work out. But in the short term, there's a
Right.
lot of things that need to be addressed, and we'll see. It's gonna be interesting to see how he deals with these things.
Yes. Talk to you later, guys. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
everyone. Nice seeing you.